afternoon. My name is Ken Lustbader. I'm one of the co-directors of the NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project. We're a cultural heritage initiative and educational resource documenting LGBTQ spaces from the 17th century to the year 2000 in New York City. And we are on the Lower East Side today and standing in front of 141 Ridge Street. That's at Ridge and Stanton Street. And to give you a little context, I'm going to just give you this little map. The green is the now, we're going to walk down to the red, which is the handball courts. And here today we are discussing Martin Wong, the artist who lived in this building, and we're joined with Ian from the Met. I'll let Ian say a few words and introduce himself.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
Very well.
Good. I'm Ian Altavere. I'm the Aaron I. Fleischman curator here at the Met's Department of Modern and Contemporary Art, and I'm super excited to join you today, Ken. And I'm standing here in our Levine Court, Gallery 915 in the Met Fifth Avenue, uptown.
That's great. And we're going to be talking about Martin Wong's in general, but specifically this painting, which we're going to go see where it was depicted. I'll just briefly provide some context why we're standing in front of Martin Wong's residence. He lived here from 1982 to 1994 when he moved out of the city back to San Francisco, where he was fun because he was sick with HIV and died of AIDS there in 1999. Martin Wong lived in this building on the 9th floor, and this is what's called a New Law tenement. And he had two exposures, which aided in the creation of his artwork. And while he was here, he painted this painting that we're going to go talk about in a bit. We're on the Lower East Side, known to many people as Loisada. It was originally a Jewish immigrant community that had an explosive growth at the turn of the century. As I said, this is a New Law tenement built in 1903, which had light and air, different from pre-war tenements. And the neighborhoods had a surge of growth because the Williamsburg Bridge opened in the early 20th century. So I'll let Ian discuss a bit about Martin Wong as an artist himself. And we may want to start walking down to the handball court.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. I always love knowing that Martin's building is still there, not far away from where I live downtown. And to think, too, that that's the exact site where he made the work that I'm standing in front of. This painting is called Attorney Street, and Martin worked on it over the course of 2 years, from 1982 to 1984, after which it very quickly entered the Met's collection. I'm proud to say colleagues formerly here noticed its power, I think, and noticed that at a very early moment. One of the things I love about this picture is that it describes in visual ways the kind of layering of language that happens in a really vibrant community like the Lower East Side, like Loisada. And so in the picture you have the street scene, and we'll see that actual site, that handball court on Attorney Street very shortly once Ken gets there. But it was a site where local graffiti artists used to apply their craft. And so in order to honor the newest tag that appeared on that wall, done by apparently a very handsome graffiti artist who Wong admired, he painted this picture and then added these layers of poetry, which were composed by his dear friend and former lover, the Nuyorican poet Miguel Pinheiro. And so you have layers of language, you have layers of graffiti art, and you just get a really an idea of the kind of vibrancy and energy of that neighborhood at a time, when so many folks talk about the Lower East Side as being sort of in ruins in the early 80s. And I love seeing an example of it looking like beautiful, full of energy and creativity. And I think, as a locus for artists living and working in New York in the in the early 80s, it's so important. And you're walking through those streets right now.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. If you look up that way, you could see his building. So it's really only a stone's throw from where we're going to be heading, which is to my left, which is the here. And you can see also, so it was really what Martin Wong said is that I paint everything I know that's within 4 blocks of my neighborhood. I paint the people and the places. So it's really important that this is the context of his life and his work. And again, just a historic preservation remnant, you could see that synagogue there. that was built in the early 20th century. That's what we call a tenement synagogue that was built on the width of what former tenements were constrained to in that location. But this neighborhood is ever changing, as you can see with the sort of new developments here, new buildings that you may have seen when you walk by. The old tenements were demolished, which is just a part and parcel of New York City. So I'm going to end on that. Let's continue to go to the handball court and maybe mute us so we're not dealing with some
Well, I
children.
remember when we were talking recently about this picture and about that neighborhood, Ken, you talked a lot about the texture of the neighborhood, but also the fact that there were few parks at first when it was developed in the turn of the last century. But now, you know, you have public spaces and even a playground or a handball court like this, right?
Yeah, there were really, New York City did not have public parks until William Wong in the late 19th century at the Henry Street Settlement created a park at that location. That was the city's first public park. This park itself is named after Nathan Strauss. It was created in 1959 with the closure of the street. And Nathan Strauss was a Jewish immigrant. He's associated with Macy's department store and Abraham and Strauss. That was a very popular store in Brooklyn as well as elsewhere. And the park is dedicated in his name. But again, it was here in 1959. And really, when you think about it historically, not that soon after, you know, less than 30 years, Martin Wong was painting it, and now it's in the Met's collection. So I just love how that layer of history is in your institution there. So,
yeah, it's so great, and I think, you know, in this corner of the gallery, and especially thinking about a moment or the 2 years that we've just been through. First, a kind of shutdown right around March 2020, and then, you know, some very important and vocal protests over racial violence in this country. This painting for me took on so many more layers of meaning. And the idea that the city is a locus for creativity and a layered site is so important. And I love knowing about the history of this handball court. And, you know, it is kind of like a backdrop, right? It's like a ready canvas to receive these layers of graffiti. By the way, I'm still trying to figure out who that tagger is that Wong and Pinheiro so admired. And I just want to point out two very beautifully hand-painted hand signs. Those are Wong's interpretation of American Sign Language signing, and they replicate in, you know, letter by letter, the wonderful lines that appear in the cartouche below. It's the real deal, Neil. I'm gonna rock your world, make your planets twirl, ain't no whack attack.
Moment, and just so we can look at it from this angle, that is the tenement building backdrop of the handball court itself, which is over here. And Christiana and I are going to walk into there, sort of to put ourselves in situ as the canvas that you can sort of deconstruct for us.
Yeah, I love that the buildings are still there. You know, that you can still see pretty much what the scene that Wong saw some 40 years ago when you're living in that neighborhood, and that those remnants are still there for us to kind of appreciate. And that as much as things change, there are some things that still remain. One of the things that I so appreciate about the LGBT historic sites, because I've used it so many times in researching works in the collection, just like this one, to go find those spots in our city that still remain and are related to our important queer history.
I just want to call out you know, the juxtaposition of both the painting and the reality here of what remains. And you know, what's wonderful about this effort that we're doing with the Met is sort of this time traveling and placemaking and visceral connection. I get very moved knowing that I'm walking in the footsteps of Martin Wong and seeing and knowing that he actually came here and painted this painting. And that's really sort of the palpable sense of why we're doing this effort and why we're working to bring to life LGBTQ history through buildings, spaces like this, and through artwork, because the artwork is got a level of anonymity if you don't know the details. But seeing that it was painted here by Wong. It was really a compelling reason to make sure that we're bringing this legacy, his legacy to life, and this history to life through this visceral connection of time traveling back with Mr. Wong.
Yeah, I agree so much. I remember walking over to this handball court about 2 years ago when I was thinking about this picture again. And you know, at that moment in 2020, walking around the city was kind of one of the only things to do, right? and the scene there was similarly quiet. The way that this painting, the way that Wong's painting depicts it. You know, there are in many of his streetscapes not actual people, but I was thinking as I was walking through that neighborhood that you're in right now, and thinking about how the street is full of language in this picture. All kinds of wonderful overlapping language, both silent language and wonderfully loud and rhythmic language in Piñero's poetry, and graffiti language, tags, and the kind of layering that they make of language, and the kind of vibrancy that that brings to a neighborhood full of life, right? And I can't help but remember, too, that this picture is made in the early years of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, a moment that, you know, would extend, of course, for another decade, and that would also claim Wong's own life and Piñero's life. And I think that it is a somber remembrance, but I love the fact that these artists' lives live on through the scene on the street and through the paintings that we collect here at the Met, and through which we can pay such great tribute.
I can't agree more, and I love, actually we're in the park now, as you know, but around us are children from schools, people playing sports here, and the color palette is, I guess with this somber day, is a bit reminiscent of the painting itself if you just look around here. What I also love is that there is a tag on the top of the building here of Toma. So I don't know who Toma is or was or why it's there, but I just love that, you know, the Lower East Side and this neighborhood is, you know, as vibrant as ever, and it's so New York. It's great.
Well, I have just one more tidbit about Wong that I'd love to share, and that's that not far away from where I'm standing now, up here on the Upper East Side, over at the Museum of the City of New York, they've collected, and Wong left them, his entire collection of street and graffiti art. And so Wong was not only a prolific painter and artist in that little studio right around the corner from where you are, but he also famously amassed works from his favorite artists in the neighborhood. Many of them were his graffiti artists. And that amazingly rich collection is in the hands of our sister institution up Fifth Avenue, Museum of the City of New York. And it's great to know that, you know, pictures of Wong's can be found in many institutions in this town, and that his own collecting of work made in that neighborhood by other artists is also close at hand. So many wonderful legacies that he left behind, and paying special tribute to him today, and to Miguel Piñero, and to that special neighborhood, Loisaida, has been really special in the context of Pride Month.
Yes, I can't agree again more. It was really so ahead of the curve, and there's wonderful videos of Wong at 140 Ridge Street, sort of in the apartment painting, but you could see that he was an organized pack rat porter ahead of it, and really had so much of that collection, and I think it really tells something about him and his contributions to New York City and American culture. So it's wonderful to pay tribute to him today, and recognize there's so many lives of people who were artists that were lost during the HIV/AIDS epidemic that still is impacting us today.
Well, you can see this picture when you're next at the Met in Gallery 915 in our Lila Atchison Wallace Art. It will be up here on this wall for at least another, maybe 5-6 months, if not longer. And you can also, I encourage you to go visit the site that it depicts, where Ken is standing right now on Attorney Street in the Lower East Side, and we're right around the corner still stands, the building where this very work was made.
And please visit our website, nyclgbtsites.org, to see the over 400 sites that we fully documented, creating a cultural landscape, including places of performance, artists' residences like Wong's, and other sites associated with the history of the LGBTQ community and its influence on American culture. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.